Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Today is Friday. What's the date today? Lost track. April 18th. Okay. Demonic sea lions is a good place to start. I got a bunch of stuff to get to, and I'm going to talk about Trump maybe in a slightly different way than normal. What's happening with Trump? There's just always layers to things. There is the emotional, like stupid, reactive fear, anger, frustration, happiness, just like to everyday events. Like there's just your reaction to, a cause and effect, right? And there's different layer levels, there's different models of the psychology, different types of psychological models of therapy. And so if you go to a therapist, they'll usually use a blend of like different models. But the bare basic one is behavior, Pavlov's dog, behaviorism, Skinner, rewards and punishments, right? So you extinguish a behavior by rewarding it, by punishing it, and you encourage a behavior by rewarding it, right? And that happens in life, things that happen, cause and effect, all these problem, reaction, solution stuff that's out there, right? So you have all those types of things. And in every treatment center, every prison, there's a behavior management program, every school. So it's the kind of the brute level of psychological development where you try to extinguish something. Of course, Pavlov's dog, they would ring a bell and they would feed a dog. And then they would ring the bell and the dog's mouth would salivate, because that's what happens when a dog eats, because it anticipated that it would be eating, Pavlov's dog. So, it's a very remedial, but, truthful. There's a layer of truth there, but it's physical truth. It's a reactive reaction of the body, right? So, rewards and punishment, temptation and fear and temptation and religion. That was all religions run on fear and temptation of something good that you're promised heaven or whatever it might be, and fear of going to hell, right? So these are the spiritual, not real spiritual tools. They're very materialistic. Appealing to your fears or your desires or whatever it might be, like all the ways they use sex and advertising sex and whatever it is everywhere, because it's a powerful, there's a powerful sex drive and pleasure that's involved, like food, things using your sensory stimulation, things like that. And then there's other layers that different other models of psychology, right? And so I don't know where I was going with this, but we live in a world where it's a lot of it. Let's talk about layers of truth. So there's that layer, and then in the spiritual world, there's what has to happen on a soul level, on an energetic level, right? So it's the opposite of that. Like you have these spectrums, you have the bare basic sort of, cause and effect type truth that's out there. You do something and something else happens. And scientific, brute level science where there's no God, there's just, scientific experiments. It's all physical, it's all chemical and physical and all these things, right? So, then you get into more subtle understanding that there's a bigger purpose, that there's etheric things going on. There's, a soul, and there's this other stuff. And so you can look at truth from any direction. But the majority of people aren't looking at truth from any direction at all. They're not looking at truth at all. People who are, everybody self-deludes, right? Where you believe something, and then somebody tells you something that, every truther's experienced this and both ends of it, where you believe something and somebody tells you and it wrecks it. Like that's the problem with truthers. They're always wrecking people's delusions. You know, I mean, not that the truthers are great, but like if you see through the facade and people are willfully deluding themselves, self delusions, and are, like if somebody's in a cult and you try to tell them about it, they're like, why'd you wreck my day? Hey, stop telling me truth, right? They don't say stop telling me truth. That's their reaction, that the truth hurts. And so this is where we live in, where most people are so, the truth about what's happening right now is too hard to take for people. Like it's over fucking whelming. Like it's overwhelming for me. And I've lived in farms and it's part of my belief system. Let me just finish this up here. So I was going to say this stuff later. But, my belief system, because my whole life I knew there was something wrong with America. Like, I knew that the system was just messed up. Like whatever it is, like I just was born with this and I just was cultivated and developed my whole life. And then I came into the Sajmark system and the idea that the system had to come down because it's demonic and that something else better had to take its place. But there'd be a painful transition and nobody wants to hear that shit, right? That's why you can't get people to do Sajmark because, it's not just that. There's no the things that you're promised in religions, the things you're promised by, any number of organizations in general are much better than what you get promised in Sajmark. And the fact that you have to change and you have to work is too much for people. They don't want to do that. They don't want to hear that shit, right? That's why it's a real thing, because it involves change and work and all these things. And that's why it's hard to sell it to people, because nobody wants to buy that shit. They want, if you want to sell something to people, you want to, say something high in the sky. So, if there's a plane going by, I got the window open. It's supposed to be a beautiful day today. So, when I talk about, we'll come back to this stuff as we go through this. Though I'll continue this discussion. The demonic sea lions.
On the West Coast, and the sea lions getting more aggressive. Experts blame the environment. Along the California coast, sea lions are getting poisoned by toxic algae, causing them to act in a way some describe as demonic. It comes amid a surge in the number of sea lions ingesting domoic acid, a neurotoxin within...
Domoic acid? You mean demonic acid?
Algae blooms through the fish they eat.
We're seeing them like they're stargazing. We're seeing some animals...
Wait, they're stargazing? Well, that is demonic.
Seem very, very sleepy, maybe right after having a seizure. They may be abnormally aggressive.
One man was surfing when he says a feral, almost demonic sea lion bit him and dragged him off his board, adding, "It was unlike anything I've ever seen in all the years I've been in the water." Marine biologists say the toxic algae bloom that usually forms every 4 to 7 years is forming more often due to warming temperatures and runoff pollution.
Hey, it's global warming that's causing demonic sea lions.
Now we're seeing an increase. Over the last 4 years, we've seen consecutive years of this harmful algal bloom off of our coast.
The Marine Mammal Care Center in San Pedro has taken in at least 146 sea lions since last month.
Okay, so other than the dragging the guy off the board, it seems like they're mostly stargazing and sleepy. I didn't watch this, I just saw the title. So I want to continue what I was saying in the intro. I'll do it during this one. I've not watched this yet, but I had a number of people write comments saying, you got to watch Trump's Easter speech. And I believe this is what this is. I had not heard of it, but, he's doing so much effed up things now.
Great faith. Many thanks as well to Secretary of State Marco Rubio. It's been fantastic. Many faith leaders.
I missed Easter completely. Unless it hasn't happened yet, and then I didn't. And this is an early. I don't know what this is, but I mean, not having young kids and not doing Easter egg hunts and whatever. But yeah.
Leaders that are here tonight. Angel Mom Patty Morin, who's been through hell. Where's Patty?
So he first thanks a bunch of holy people that are in attendance.
Patty, stand up, Patty. Please.
Woo, Patty. She's an angel mom.
Yes, her incredible daughter. And her daughter's looking down on Patty today. This was some day for you. And we appreciate.
So where is she looking down from? Like she's just hovering above the, because, this idea that heaven is somehow beyond the firmament. Heaven is not a place. As far as I know, heaven doesn't exist. And that was, Babaji said that he found hell, but no heaven. But there is etheric worlds, which is, could be considered heaven. But there's nothing in terms of the gates of heaven, that's described in Christianity. This is my understanding. Like, nobody can know this stuff because you don't know stuff. Even the most evolved spiritual master is going to be limited by the third dimensional physical body. Even the most etheric, going to these various brighter worlds and whatever it might be. That until you die, there's going to be a limitation imposed, with all the sleep and all the spiritual experiences you might have. But in terms of my understanding about this, you're automatically going to go wherever you're going to go based on the work and your accomplishments spiritually here. That you're in a realm of consciousness. And that's why it's hard to understand. Like there's people that are in a much higher level consciousness than you. And there's most of the majority of people, based on, the quality of my viewer, are in a much lower level of consciousness. A lot of people live in this cause and effect. So first of all, I assume all of my viewers, my regular viewers, have the ability for abstract thought, which seems like nothing to most of us. But for the majority of people, it's like 60% of people don't have abstract thought. A lot of people have, you have to understand the level of poverty that exists in the world and how many people, are fresh out of the animal kingdom and are, in terms of the transmigration of soul, in their past life, they were like an animal or something that is now, like underpopulated. And there's more people and less animals, right? So that's what, that comes from. And so, the majority of people just don't have that level of consciousness. That's where they're at. And so as you move forward on your spiritual journey, it opens up avenues of insight and consciousness and expansion of consciousness and understanding of things. And a lot of people just don't have that. And, that's not for those people. There's a lot to shit for those people. The content shows, a lot of the news is just based in people with no abstract thought, right? And you call those people dumb, but they're just where they are, right? Like, sometimes I joke about the people like that. But in reality, they're just, they're doing their best that they can, right? And Trump appeals to those people. And so this is the kind of spiritual talk you get from somebody who has no connection to God to dumb people who really are on a very remedial level of spiritual evolution. And that's, you put the two together and you get Trump.
Appreciate it, Patty, and we're all with you 100%. And you are indeed an angel, Mom. Thank you very much. And a very special thanks to Charles Billingsley for the
Billingsley's got Billingsley.
Performance. Thank you, Charles.
Charles, incredible. Trump's eyes look really weird. Remember we used to point out Joe Biden's like deer in headlights, dark eyes, right?
Woo. Nearly 2,000 years ago, during the sacred week, the living Son of God entered Jerusalem in triumph. Soon after, the Savior of mankind, who brought truth and light into the world, was betrayed, arrested, and tried, beaten, and nailed to a cross and crucified.
I wanted to say this thing about symbols, because symbols are, I don't talk about symbology anymore, but about things that are like have no truth to them, right? The cross should never have been the symbol for Jesus. The cross was a representation, for whatever Jesus did or didn't do, and whoever Jesus was or wasn't, right? He had higher level teachings that were for people to elevate their understanding of God. Jesus is one of many people who have done this. And, his story is small. His real story is small in the amount of people that he affected, right? So there are people who come down and are in a higher level, either through experience or if they just come down from a higher level of consciousness. And they impart wisdom to the masses. And they usually die miserable deaths, not in terms of torture and shit, just miserable because, like, they, their work that they have to do is, it's just not, it's just, it's like throwing a cup of water in the desert. It just doesn't, there's nothing there. Like, they do their best and it's disappointing. It usually ends up being a lot, like there's a high end to your success and a low end. And when you're changing people for the better, you're hoping, you're not changing people. You're giving people the tools and the information to change themselves. And people just won't respond. It's a real problem here for a variety of reasons. Some of them I know about, some of them I probably don't, but I know, I get the sense of it. I think most people do. In terms of changing yourself and changing other people, people just don't want it. Only under forced circumstances do people change. Only under desperation, when they're weeping to God for, help or forgiveness, severe pain, do people want to change, right? They have to feel pain, like something's missing inside of them. Like at the best case scenario, you feel something's missing inside of you, right? But sometimes I lose this is all about the cross, so I want to remember I got to come back to the cross, right? And so, like Jesus came down and he imparted teachings. I think he was trained, I'm sure he was trained in India. He had some yogic training. So it's not like he had this, ordained son of God thing that they try to tell you. But he came down and he had a higher level of understanding of things. And he told his disciples and people about this. And it was a small group of people. And at some point, his people and the powers that be said, fuck this guy. Some of it was Jesus' own. He was feeling kind of bummed, towards the end. Because, he had, like he said, he had 12 disciples. So he had 12 disciples, not, so think about this. Like here's a guy that, whatever people claimed Jesus was, he could only win over 12 real people. Like, and this isn't a knock on Jesus. This is a knock on humanity. That he could only win over 12 people. And of those 12 people, the best guy, Peter, the guy who said, you're on this rock I'll build my church, he straight up denies Jesus. He's like, I didn't know that guy, right? Like, so, like Jesus says, imagine being denied. Like, like think about how you feel when somebody you have an intimate relationship says, I don't know that guy. I don't know that girl. I don't know that person, right? Like, think about, like, that's a fucked up thing to do, right? And that's the best of it. Now, he had Doubting Thomas who straight up doubted him. Yeah, I don't think he could do that. I don't believe, I guess that had to do with the, when Jesus was so-called resurrection. But yeah, he can't do that. That's just, he doubted him. And Judas betrayed him. Judas straight up betrayed him and sold him out for 30 pieces of silver, whatever it was. And, and so, and then like knew that they were going to kill the guy. And so he had 9 quality disciples. Of course, St. Paul was excellent in terms of building the church, but St. Paul came later, never even met Jesus. And then the rest of these people spitting on him, people who were, digging Jesus, turned on him. And, some of that had to do with Jesus. Like some of that he created. I don't want to, I've talked about that in the past. It's not about this here, but, and they decided to kill the guy. And what did he do? Like, well, he turned some fucking tables over, so the Pharisees, the Jewish leadership, were pissed at him. And the Roman people, the Roman Empire is like, well, he's usurping the position of the king. Like, this would be Trump being jealous of a saint, right? Trump being jealous of some saint. And saying, hey, this guy's stealing my thunder. Get rid of him. Like, I don't have to compete with this real saint. I'm a piece of shit grifter. And so they decided to kill the guy. And, this has to do with Easter as well. And so it was a failure. Like, Jesus' disciples were a failure for him to really induce change. His story caught on later. But the essence of the story and his really good teachings have been lost. And so the Christian movement is, been very violent, land acquisition, manifest destiny. The Europeans who are very brutal and violent, and going after colonizers and this stuff, and it's just and so the beauty of Jesus's life and the greatness of his teachings, most of that has been lost to the majority of people. There've been some Christian saints that have somehow plugged into it, high developed souls that come in, and Christianity is their religion, and that's their vehicle to find God. But it's been a failure. And the 9 Inch Nails, who was the band, the 9 Inch Nails, and the 9 Inch Nails being put into his hands and his feet, those big giant spikes. If you look at these things, railroad spikes, kind of things, holding him up to a fucking board. The guy's still alive. He's been spit on, tortured, humiliated. For what? For no real crime. And his only crime was to tell truth to people. He was a truther, a spiritual truth on top of it. And he was a social reformer, too, to whatever extent. But he didn't murder anybody. I mean, what the fuck, right? And, and people were once sitting at his feet, were spitting on him and doing shit, like that. And he's sitting up on this cross, a big fuck you, thorn of crowns, this king of God, this kind of shit. I mean, again, this is the official story. And then Christians carry around this fucking cross. It's like his worst moment. It was a failure of a movement. It's a failure of people. He's dying, Father, why hast thou forsaken me? And he's up on the cross, and there's no dying for our sins. That's all bullshit. You can't die for somebody else's sins. It's the worst thing, like so many other things that you could be a reminder of Jesus. But those things are subtle. And so it's for people who love blood and drama and all the bullshit that, that makes them do this religion. Yeah, the cross is a symbolic thing, but it shouldn't be, right? It's like, it's not Jesus' best moment for him. And he's a human being. He was a human being. No matter how spiritual you are, you're still a human being. And human beings have similar, type of feelings. Imagine what it was like for him, those 3 days of hell. It's I don't know if you heard that, my computer cord fell on the ground and made a little thing. My dogs jumped. Anyways, that's Easter.
For our sake, he gave up his life, and as the very great Reverend Billy Graham once said,
Billy Graham? What did Billy Graham say? Like Billy Graham? I mean, even Billy Graham, like you're quoting that fucking guy?
God proved his love on the cross when Christ hung and bled and died. It was God saying to the world, I love you.
Jesus Christ. That's not, I mean, just think about what's being said there. Like people, like there's that stigmata stuff that's happened in like South America, but like Christianity is just full of blood and torture and war and suffering, and that guy hitting himself with kind of 9 tails in the that famous book or whatever it is. Dan Brown, The Da Vinci Code. I had to pause and look it up. And there was that character, Simon, I think his name was, I didn't read the books, but saw the movie. And he was hitting himself in the back, whipping himself, self-flagellating, all that shit. Torture, and, there's just all this darkness, the Crusades and all this stuff in Christianity. Because of this moment. He's saying God showed his love by killing his only son. Like, it's fucked up. Like, God would be totally fucked up by doing that, right? Like, making Jesus suffer for all the fucked up people on earth. Like, why would you do that? Like, why would you do that to any person, right? There's reasons that Jesus had to go through what he had to go through. But they're not the reasons they tell you. This is the compelling story to people who don't have the ability for abstract thought. They don't have the ability for Jesus' higher teachings. And they're just in in pain, and, they want some kind of promise. They want a deal, right? And so they got a good deal, a fake deal. It's a scam. It's not a real deal. That, if they do whatever, they obey their Christian religion, And that's all it is. It's a money, it's fealty, it's faith, it's loyalty to an organization. You're promised heaven. Not that you have to work for heaven, like you just have to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and that's accepting the church. It's not accepting Jesus, because it's just their version of Jesus. Everybody has a version. Let's say your grandparents die, your grandfather dies, and there's, the parents had like 6 or 7 kids, 5, 6, 7 kids, and they all married and had a number of kids. So you have grandparents who had 30 grandchildren, something like this, right? Your grandfather dies, and each one of them has a different version of that person, like a different story of that person, right? Just like anybody, Trump, like the people who work for Trump. He has people who work for him now that say they love him, but he has a lot of people that used to work for him that say that he sucks, right? The people who no longer work for Trump, they are the ones who are probably the most believable, because but each person has a different version of you. Like there's people who think of you as this way, people think of you as that way. Your kids, they all have different, they all have different fathers. Like they all have, it's the same person, but they have a different father, a different mother. They're a description of their experience. Like you talk to your siblings about their parents, your parents, and it's like you have a different, idea. Like oftentimes it's like, well, I think dad's at fault, I think mom's at fault, like this kind of stuff, right? And, that's Jesus. Jesus has, people look at him differently, but how many people really knew him? I mean, when he was alive, and certainly not now. And so, with all this bullshit stories, and they've, taken things from other traditions, other things, other stories that were from other, other spiritual people. And so Jesus is an amalgam of, a lot of bullshit, and then there's the real Jesus, which very few Christians know anything about and would want. Like, they don't even want to know what he looked like. The Jesus that they know, that this white, sort of blue-eyed dude, European-looking guy, that doesn't exist. He didn't look like that at all. He did not look like a white guy who lived in England or Finland or some shit like that.
Those are beautiful words from a great man, Franklin, right? A great man, Franklin.
I mean, the majority of white Christians, if Jesus walked in to their church, be like, it can't be him. I mean, that's how fucked up, that's the way I'm talking about self-delusion, right? That you wouldn't accept Jesus the way he really is, physically. If Jesus came back physically, you wouldn't believe that's Jesus just by the fact that he doesn't look like you think he should look. That he isn't a white guy like people think. Whatever he was Middle Eastern, and he didn't have blue eyes, and he didn't have these things. He wasn't, this was not, and there's no description of Jesus like that. It's just the way that they decide. You're not going to try to sell to a bunch of people who, didn't have access to people of color and were prejudiced against them. People want to have a savior that looks like them. And so Christianity took off in Europe, and they had to make Jesus look like a European. Otherwise, you're not going to get white people to think of a Middle Eastern guy who they're killing, in the Crusades and shit like that, right?
Incredible father. I went to Yankee Stadium with my father many years ago to watch your father. And you think we have big crowds today? It was some crowd. Never forget it. So thank you very much, and thank you for being here, Franklin, very much.
Franklin Graham.
3 day, your father would be very proud of you, by the way. Incredible job you did.
Yeah, why would you even know that? Are you channeling him? Are you communicating? Do you know anything? Do you know the guy? Maybe he told Franklin he was a piece of shit his whole life, and he wished he would have been a real son. Like, who knows? Billy.
3 days later, Christ's followers found the empty tomb. Jesus had defeated darkness and death and promised new life.
Darkness and death. See, this is, even, he's someone who wrote this for him. Like, he didn't write this himself. And so, but he defeated darkness and death. That, why would God create a system? Jesus would later die. So he's not here now. So then he surrendered to darkness and death, right? Like death and darkness, like this whole idea that, you can defeat it. You can defeat darkness and death. he fought it and won. Was it like MMA or boxing? How did they, like, it's just silly. This is what I'm talking about. This is why people don't watch my channel, because people believe stupid shit. And then when you call them on it or you just explain it to them, they're so attached to it, they leave. Like, this, because, they don't want just the basic truth, not some deep truth. Like, it's silly to think that Jesus defeated darkness and death, right? Whatever happened in terms of the resurrection, I don't know. There's some people said that he went into a deep yogic state because he was a yogi, and people thought he was dead. He wasn't. Other people said that he was stuck around spiritually and appeared in spirit form to the disciples. He left when he was 18. He left Israel, and he went to India. Like, there's all this evidence that he was in India and he received spiritual training, and he comes back as a new person. And then there's the the post-crucifixion type time, where some of the teachings, some of his disciples, the book of Mark, the book of Matthew, these, various books. Jesus didn't write the Bible, which is another issue. It's been written by his disciples. And St. Paul, who ever met the guy. So you have, all this stuff that's channeled in the book. Like, that's what this is, him appearing to them in spiritual form. And whatever relationship they had. And then when they all die, all the people who knew Jesus died, they had this book that was left over, and they started manipulating the book. And, this is truth. This is truth of your religion if you're a Christian. Like, it's undeniable. And so it's got to be like, the ultimate taken with a grain of salt. Because this shit's just weird that he's saying, right?
To all of humankind, and that's what we celebrate each year at Easter as we joyfully proclaim on Sunday, he is risen. The death and resurrection of Jesus are the essence of the Christian faith. Whether rich or poor, healthy or sick, young or old, or in times of peace or war, Christians everywhere find solace and hope in the knowledge that Christ died for them and that they could be united with him in heaven.
That's like a really bogus thing. That, it's the foundation of Christian. So someone else can't die for your sins, right? So that, once you realize that, then you can't have the deal that you're being promised by Christianity, right? So we used to have this thing, you had Good Friday, and then you had Ash Wednesday, where they would you'd carry these little palms, and they would pass out these palms, I assume from palm trees. And, I can barely, this is when I was a kid. So I'm going to Catholic church. So you go to Palm Wednesday, and then Good Friday, you couldn't eat meat for some reason. So we used to eat fish, which was weird. We didn't have to have protein, like vegetarian meals, or sometimes it's good not to eat any meat at all, right? But whatever. My mom would cook fish. And then you'd have Good Friday, which is, whatever, I guess the day he was killed. And it wasn't on a Friday. I mean, they fucked up the whole dates and days. Easter is the god Istora. She's a pagan god. And she had a whole thing where she had a rabbit that laid eggs. It was a whole fucking thing. And so that's where all that shit comes from. The Easter Bunny has fucking zero to do with Jesus. If they have rabbits in Israel, which they may or may not have, where Jesus was killed, or wherever he was, wherever the fuck Jesus was killed, right? There was no rabbits. That's not a Christian tale. And, it's a weird thing. They would, on Ash Wednesday, they would put a cross, I think, on your forehead with ashes. And you'd supposed to leave it on. I think there was some fasting involved or something. I don't know what it was on Good Friday. And then, whatever. And then Easter Sunday, but now we have this Easter egg hunt, which is kind of fun. I like Easter egg hunts. Like, I thought that was cool. I like doing that. Hiding the eggs for my kids, being a part of that. I like to do it when I was a kid. And, there's candy and chocolate and shit, right? And it has nothing to do with Jesus, right? I mean, this is, the guy was he was nailed to a fucking cross. And we're finding Easter eggs with our kids with little chocolate candies in them because the pagans believed in this god Astora, right?
And that's what we want. That's what we all want. The miracles of Holy Week set in motion a transformation in human existence. Countless millions of Americans have been moved by Christ's example to heal the sick, defend their families, lift up their communities, and make up.
And and ethically cleanse the Palestinians, and kick Denmark out of Greenland, and build weapons of mass destruction and cause economic tragedies and starvation of kids with tariffs. Like this is the bullshit of Christianity, where there's no real stuff here. Like, I mean, this is like a bullshit Christian. Like he's not a real Christian, and I don't know what he believes or not believes. He's a bullshit person in general. He's a bullshit everything. He's not a real good businessman. He's not anything but a good, grifter. But, if what I'm saying is true, and it is, and, you are not going to heaven, that based in the deal that what you've been promised, this is a bullshit promise from a bullshit religion, and you're not going to heaven. And what I'm telling you is true. The majority of Christians would react to that. You understand? Like it's where truth is painful. Like, would you want to know if you weren't going to heaven, if there's no such thing as heaven, and there's no, not in the sense of you do have a soul and your soul's going somewhere, but not heaven. Like it's not, you haven't worked for anything. Like you haven't achieved that. In Sajmarg, there's liberation, the freedom from future births on planet Earth, where you're liberated from your earthly bondage. And it's kind of hard to achieve. Whatever the amount of people, it's not millions that have reached that level. There's some people, souls that come down already at that level. Like they don't have any earthly bondage in terms of they're not going to get stuck here unless they do stupid shit. But usually it doesn't happen. Like they're a saint, they're coming down, they're doing their work, and they're leaving. And they're already at that level. They're not bound to planet Earth. And that's a rare occasion. Maybe 100 different souls, 1,000, whatever, over, thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, or whatever it might be. Modern history, let's say the last 5,000 years. How many souls have reached liberation? It's definitely less than 10,000, out of billions. But even maybe less than 1,000 and possibly less than 100, who knows? And that's the bare minimum. The second one is to merge back into divinity. And almost nobody's achieved that. That's a handful of people that have reached that level. And Jesus wasn't one of them. So, you have this like real thing. And nobody wants to hear it because what they have to do and what they have to give up and the way they have to live their lives, it just wouldn't appeal to anybody. Like it just wouldn't. Like even the most devotional people, never mind, people without abstract thought. And so, that's why humanity is stalled, because everyone would much rather just indulge in sensory stimulation and believe bullshit things because there's some worry about death, right? That's what this is about. Where do you go when you die? People want to enjoy the shit out of their lives and not think about God and just have a lot of sensory fun. They don't want a lot of pain and suffering, and they want to enjoy without the hangover, right? They want to have the indulgence without the consequences, and so they need some bullshit like story to make them feel good psychologically, and so that they're not worried about that. Oh, I got that handled. In India they have these gurus that will negotiate with people for these rites of passage and spiritual whatever it might be, and it costs a certain amount of money, and the people come in and say no, because everything's bargaining in India, right? And there's no real thing there. You got people who aren't holy that are taking advantage of people's fear of death. Like, what happens to my soul? When people realize they have a soul, and they're like, well, I don't want to stop living. Like the thought of dying is difficult for people, right? And we think about they'll no longer exist. And, you see other people die and you're like, oh, it just freaks you out, whatever. And then you have to have some kind of psychological place to go to rest your mind to think, all right, I got that taken care of. I gave money at church and I read the Bible a couple times, parts of it. And I try to do some of the stuff, and I believe in Jesus, so I'm all set. And then you tell people, hey, you're not all set, because they aren't all set, right? You're telling them the truth, and they freak the fuck out. They can't hear it, because that unsettles the fucking. I mean, as much as not believing in America, like believing America could fall, the system we're 100% dependent on. I mean, that's another thing. These are things I say here regularly, and they're truthful things. On many different levels. Like, America isn't going to last forever, and you're not going to get the promise that your bogus religions told you you're going to get. And those two things, I mean, it's hurtful to me in terms of viewership, but they're just fundamental truths that should be obvious to everybody. They're painful truths, the inconvenient truths.
Our country stronger, better, and greater than ever before. With God's grace over these past 3 months, and we have had a great 3 months. They say maybe the best 3 months.
So now he's saying God has graced him with, saying the Palestinian people should be removed from their country and backing Israel's, genocide of that thing. I mean, that's just one of the many things. And then, the tariffs and all these other things, the lies and just the incompetence. And he's invoking there's God's graces over him. Like, that's, look at this motherfucker. This is probably why people wanted me to watch this.
Ever for a president.
Let's go back.
Had a great 3 months. They
Go back a little bit to the grace speed.
our country stronger, better, and greater than ever before. With God's grace over these past 3 months.
Again, God's grace feels a lot different than what you're feeling now.
And we have had a great 3 months. They say maybe the best 3 months ever for a president.
Grace is a spiritual condition that you feel. In Sajmark, we have the transmission, which is like grace, but it isn't. And then there's just these things where it's God's grace, which is a rarity. And it just comes when it comes, right? And it hasn't been here those last 3 months. I mean, in terms of awakening and awareness and, people's individual epiphanies, there might be something similar to grace. But Trump is saying that God's grace is over the government, which is like fucked up. Like, so he's talked about Jesus and all these things. Now he's getting into his, he's talking about Easter. And now it's talking about the glory of America, right? I mean, the MAGA stuff.
And an administration. It was really great. We have fantastic people. And they're people that believe like you do. But we've achieved more than most administrations, they've been saying, do in 4 years or even 8 years, just in a short period of time. And I think there's a whole new spirit in our country, and I think there's a whole
So,
new...
I showed this woman painting Trump at a Christian, like, evangelical type of thing, and people, taking video and putting their hands in the air, and like Trump's a saint. And them trying to marry this idea that Trump is somehow the second coming of Jesus, or and he isn't. Like, he is, like, if you look at what it says in the Bible, which, like, there's the end days stuff, right? There's the people, some angel's going to blow a horn, all the good people are going to leave and die, and then everyone else is stuck in this post-apocalyptic world, right? Which there's some truth to this. Like, I think all of us can see that coming, right? But he's talking about death and defeating death and darkness, but when good souls are just going to leave, they're going to just get, zapped out of here because they don't have to suffer with the rest of the people. That ain't true. That's going to happen. There's none of that shit. I mean, in terms of mass die-off, yeah. There's going to be a mass die-off, but it isn't going to be just of good people. And if those people aren't just going to heaven, most of the people are going to want to come back and aren't going to be able to. And where they go, unless they incarnate back into animals or something, they regress. And, they're no longer people. Their soul has to go back into, lower forms of life. I mean, who knows? Like, I don't know. Nobody does. But for Trump to come in here and try to hijack this Easter service and tell people what a great job he's doing, like, what a piece of shit, right? Like, in a bogus religion, that's, full of lies, it's still better than what Trump's doing here. I mean, maybe it isn't because your spiritual life is more important than your material life. Trump's in charge of your material life. At least he's influenced. He's supposed to be the person who's with the most material power, and he isn't, because there's, people above him, shadow government people. But, he has a lot of material power as a figure. He's influencing people as as a person out there, as a celebrity. And, for him to come in and claim, divinity is inspiring his fucking debacle of a administration.
Respect for our country. Our country was not respected 5 months ago, 6 months ago, although I think November 5th did a lot to get that respect, Franklin. I think it was...
Franklin, don't bring my name into this.
Big day. I hope is going to go down as one of the most important days in the history of our country, November 5th. We're restoring our prosperity, securing our borders. We're rebuilding the U.S. military.
Election day is never what you celebrate, right? So this is why people told me to watch this. Election day is not a day you celebrate. Have we ever celebrated election day? Because elections are about the next election. All the energy is on the next election. They're not going to celebrate, it's like a birthday. The way they celebrate Christmas. They would celebrate Trump's birthday as a great man. Like, if anything, the day this guy, great man, was born, the savior of America, the guy who made America great again. Like, that's what his vision is. It's all bullshit. It ain't going to happen. But, if they was going to celebrate a day, it would be his birthday. They're not going to celebrate the day he was elected. Like some great thing happened, like he talks about that day. People don't think about the day that he's elected, all of that. They think about the day he did something, like the day he brought in these miracle tariffs. Like that would be remembered, right? This was the day it changed everything for America, the tariffs or something like that. And none of that's true. It's all horseshit. But like he just, like everyone's going to remember November 5th. They're going to celebrate November 5th. Well, there's going to be more elections on November 5th, like every 7 years, right? Or whatever it is.
I did it once, now I'm going to do it again, and even more so. We're standing up for a persecuted Christian and so many Christians that have been persecuted all over the world. So horrible what's happened. And defending religious liberty. We had nobody fighting for our Christians in other parts of the world that were being so incredibly destroyed, killed.
You seriously talking about fighting for religious liberty? Right?
Injured, hurt, but they died. So many died.
What about these immigrants that are Christians? Like some of these illegal immigrants are Christian people, and you're kicking them the fuck out of the country, hunting them down like dogs. Like they're Christians. They are legitimate Christians that go to church, regardless of, making a mistake or, breaking a law and coming into this country. There's plenty of Christians who break laws. It's a sin, right? Jesus is supposed to die for their sins. Is their sin coming into America illegally? Is that a sin? Yeah, that's a sin. Okay. Jesus died for it, fuck. Like, according to your belief system. Like, who are you to punish these people? And then demonize them. Sure, kick them out of the country. It's illegal. But what about, them being Christians? You're going to treat them like they're Christians or they're illegals? What are they? They're no longer Christians if they came to America illegally? Like most of these, Spanish people, Hispanic people that are coming here illegally are Christians through the southern border.
You wouldn't think that could happen in this time, in this sort of modern time. I proudly created the White House Faith Office and a brand new DOJ task force to eradicate anti-Christian bias. And there is anti-Christian. You don't hear about that very much, but there is anti-Christian bias.
We hear about anti-Semitism quite a bit. You're fucking tagging old school universities, these Ivy League universities, and you're withdrawing money and shit, which again I don't care about because these fucking universities are power centers of bullshit power. But this is so fucked up. He's doing this.
We're stopping the radical indoctrination in our schools and supporting school choice, and we're going to be moving our education department and various educational departments down to the states where they belong. we spend more money per pupil than any country in the world, and we don't get the answer. We are in the lower tier of 40 nations, the 40 nations that they rate. And I think when we do this, it's going to make a tremendous difference. Think of it, we spend more per pupil than any country in the world, and yet it's Denmark and Norway, Sweden, even China does very well in the top 10. And so we can't blame it on
Okay, the Chinese shit is cheating because there's a lot of poor, uneducated people. And all the rest of these countries, it's, China, not every kid goes to school in China, right? In America, every kid goes to school. So it's the fact that there's so many more people. There's 10 million people in Denmark, 10 million people in these other countries. And so, of course, they're going to have a better education. And all they have is middle class. They don't have a lot of poverty. They don't have a lot of homelessness. They don't have a lot of, racial, prejudice and things like this, right? They have, one group of people there. And they're all Danish. They're all these various people. So you can't compare those two things, right?
Size. We're big. China is really big. And we're going to be there. We're going to be there soon. When the states run their education department instead of some bureaucrat in Washington, it's going to make a very big, I think it's going to.
Because everybody knows that there's no corruption on a state level. There's no corruption on a local level, a town level, and that there's no corruption in any of these school systems and superintendents of these people, right? I mean, it's silly. Like, people are still people. Whether federal oversight is a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. The Fifth Amendment is the freedom of religion. With Trump is in the mixing of church and state. And this is clearly mixing the church and state here. All the stuff that he's saying. That there's a religious belief and he's got a lot of real Christians, fake Christians, bad Christians, but people who identify as Christians as leaders, right? Pete Hegseth thinks he's a Christian, right? Would Christ be happy with him? No. But Pete Hegseth thinks he's doing a good job. These militarized Christians, and he has them. This is mixing church and state.
Going to make a very big difference. And I also, and this was a very easy one for me, I guess some people still fight it, because I saw on television today a Democrat congressman fighting so hard. I banned men from women's sports. Seems easy.
That's a good thing, but again, I mean, that whole thing was madness. But, he's attributing that to Christianity, and, it's beyond that, right? Like, it's not just for Christians. Plus, what all the Democrats who are Christians, or say they are. Like, who are you to decide who's a real Christian or not? A guy who doesn't even know his a guy who's taking something that's supposed to be spiritual and bringing politics into a church, a place of worship, on this holy day. That you're supposed to be talking about Jesus' death. He read a bunch of bullshit things that he doesn't know about because he hasn't read the Bible. He doesn't have a favorite Bible verse. And then he's coming in and talking about, what he's doing and how great he is and how God's blessed him and his administration. And, people who buy this shit because they buy the bullshit Christian stuff. Like, it's a bogus religion and it's not going to deliver on its promises, just like this motherfucker isn't going to deliver on his promises. These are things that you want to believe. It's wishful thinking. It's coming from a place of desperation as your country and your religion falls apart. Christianity in America do not exist in the future. The religion will disappear. I mean, all these things, there'll be some memories and remembrance of Christ, but probably not all that much. This has happened before. And America, there'll be no place called America at some point in the future, not that far off. Like, it could be a couple hundred years. Like, it's just, there's a point where religions disappear. There's lots of them that have disappeared before. And then certainly countries and empires disappear. You look all over the globe, and there are countries like Palestine. Palestine was called Palestine sometime in, I think, the 30s or 40s, right? So, 100 years ago. It was known as something else before that. And there was the country of Israel used to be a bigger country, and then it was called something else before that, right? And there was no countries at all. Like there was kingdoms, there were small kingdoms, and then overall they started dividing these countries into borders and lines and stuff that are redrawn, and then the names are changed, and sometimes the people are completely different, and their belief systems and all these things. There's no real. I mean, people like to have order, but it doesn't exist, right? There's just land, and whoever can dominate that land in an animalistic fight for territorial fights, territorial pissings, right?
And I signed an executive order making it official and the official policy of the United States that God created two genders, male and female. That's not too difficult. So there's so much to celebrate this Easter. This is really, I hope, going to be one of the great Easters ever.
It's going to be because his presidency, we can celebrate this Easter. We can celebrate Jesus being tacked to a cross because of my making it so men can't take estrogen and beat the shit out of women in sports because I've done this great thing, in this demonic world we live in where seals are going demon. It's going to be the greatest Easter of all time.
Because we have something going that I don't think this country has seen in 100 years. And as we gather with family and friends, we'll not forget the true source of our joy and our strength, America.
Okay, so making America great again is going back 100 years? I mean, so what is that? 1925? We were in the Depression 100 years ago, right? So going back 100 years, you'd have to go back. So you're saying pre-Depression, like that's what he's saying when there was tariffs that started the Depression. He said the trade imbalance, not the central bank, not the world reserve currency, the Fed and these other world banks, these country banks that are part of a world bank system that brought in a usury system that allowed a bum like you to borrow a shit ton of money so he could run business after business into the ground. Like if Trump couldn't borrow money from banks, he would have no success. He couldn't generate a company from his own, genius. And so like he's benefited from the economic system being this debt-based system. And so, if you're saying that 100 years ago is when America got fucked, it's when we brought the Federal Reserve in 1913, I believe. And then after that, we've been on a debt-based currency model, a usury system, a global usury system, which is the markets and all these things that you worship, that you really worship, that are in control of you, and the banksters that you bow before, right?
Is put our trust in God. It will always be in God we trust. We will never change that. There's a movement to change it. It will not happen.
Yeah, because it shouldn't be. God should have nothing to do with that demonic money. In God we trust.
Don't let that happen. Can you imagine a movement to change that, Robert?
Are you going to change the pyramid on the back of the fucking dollar with the weird ass eye and the fucking little hidden owl? Are you going to change that shit in the dollar bill? You're going to change the fucking capstone of the pyramid? The floating capstone of a pyramid that has nothing to fucking do with America. It has to do with the Freemasons and their, worship of these, ancient aliens that built the pyramids. Like you change that, and God we trust is how could those two things go together, and all the symbology and the eagle and all that stuff. I mean, the dollar has been like exposed.
You're not happy about that when you hear that. Look at him. He's getting angrier and angrier. We can get angry too, can't we, huh?
Yeah, good Christian anger.
No, it's never going to change. And with God's help, we can overcome every challenge, triumph over every evil, and restore the spirit of faith in the United States for generations to come.
It's sick that people believe that shit, that he's a man of God. And this shit he's doing is God's work. The only thing that he's doing that's God's work is destroying America because it's God's will. And I'm 100%, the spiritual beings that do God's work, the higher developed souls that monitor this planet. America's got to go, right? And not that, I'm psyched about that. It's just fucking the painful truths that, that are talked about here. Because America is a demonic country in a demonic world global system that's forgotten about God. Because, people of religion and people of God believe that they can bend reality to God, that God will bend reality to their will. Truthful people go to God and get slapped in the face by hard truths. Their ego gets slapped around by hard truths. Like all of us who meditate, all of us who connect with divinity, God's always telling us, you need to do something better in a gentle way. Like it's shown to you the things that you have to do better, that you have to change and improve. And a lot of those times you don't want to hear it. But it's undeniable because it's coming from God and it's coming from an internal process. It isn't coming from, sometimes it's coming from external feedback in your life. But the higher developed souls don't need that. You just connect to God and God tells you, you have to change this, you have to change that, these things. And, and you do or you don't, but at least you know what God wants you to do. And this motherfucker and the people that follow him are trying to claim God is making them do what they're doing. And maybe to some extent, God's making Trump, he is doing God's work by destroying America. But it isn't like what he believes is happening. Like he thinks, whatever. Whatever Trump thinks is what Trump thinks. Whatever his followers think is what they think. It's all bullshit. They're all lying to themselves, right?
We have a very simple slogan: make America great again, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're making America great again, and I like to add that I really believe greater than ever before. So once again, let me wish you all a very joyful and blessed Easter, and I would now like to ask Pastor Jensen Franklin, a supporter right from day one, he's been here, I think, Paula, from the first moment that we started, and who would have known that it was going to turn out this way, but the support I've had from
I think everyone kind of knew it was going to turn out this way.
Evangelicals, Christians, and everybody.
What do you say?
This way, but the support I've had from evangelicals, Christians, and everybody, people of faith, really, has been incredible. I believe it's been unprecedented, actually, by a lot, not just by a little bit.
By a lot.
So, Pastor Franklin, if you would, please come up. Thank you very much.
Okay, so there's that fucking, this is why, holy shit. So every morning, sometimes at night, sometimes when I'm meditating at night, sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, then I'm there, awake for a little bit. And I either meditate or just try and go back to sleep. Ideas will flood into me. Like I'll just get all these ideas of things I'm going to say in the video. Mostly in the morning, and a lot of times when I go for walks, it's a beautiful day outside. So I just moved the chicks out of the greenhouse. The last video I showed that they had been in the greenhouse, and I dumped the chips. And I have to think about, like, we have morel mushrooms coming up, like this kind of farm stuff. And, the chicks are going to have to be outside pretty soon for a variety of reasons, and it's warming up. And then just be free ranging and going around the yard and picking up bugs and grass. It's a good time of year for all that. Building up protein and then going in to a coop at night. We have a separate coop for them until they get old enough to be with the gen pop of the main chickens. And so I got some outdoor things. I'm throwing some wildflower seeds outside and then taking the tractor with a roller on it to make sure the birds don't eat all of them. And, we have these sort of flower walks around the pasture. So a beautiful spring day. And spring's just a great time of year. There were lots of toads outside last night in the pond and making frogs a return. It's got warm. It's windy today, but it's like 75 already. I was walking around in shorts. And, this flood of information comes to me. And sometimes when I'm walking, like I'll go for a walk and I'll think of something else to add, right? And, then this is what's happening right now. But I just get this information that comes through me, right? This being a conduit, which is part of the Sagemark system. Connecting to divinity and letting free exchange of information like you have on the internet, but it's more, it's not as much self-directed. So I had all these ideas today of things I wanted to say, and they fit so perfectly into Trump's Easter message, right? So some viewers recommended the Easter message. It's now Friday. I didn't even know he gave an Easter message, and then all of a sudden saw these comments, and I didn't get to the comments like in a timely fashion, and then I pull it up, and then I have these things to say, and I haven't watched the Easter message. I don't know what's going to be in it, and yet these things that are I'm about to say anyway are just perfectly fit into that narrative, right? With him, doing this bogus stuff. And so another thing, of course, is this. Well, this goes with it here.
Or hold you in contempt. Will you take steps to return Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the United States and put him in front of a judge?
Well, I'm not involved in it. I'm
not involved in it. He's been saying that a lot. Like more and more, he talks about how great he's doing. And then when something's controversial, I'm not involved. When the press is going after something, I'm not involved in that. But of course you're involved. You're a fucking president, right? You're totally involved. These people all worship you, and they do your bidding, right? But when something's going to politically dangerous, I'm not involved with that, right? I don't know about that. Why would I be involved? Why are you asking me such questions? I'm not involved with that. Why would you ask me a question of involvement?
Put him in front of a judge.
Well, I'm not involved in it. I'm going to respond by saying you'll have to speak to the lawyers, the DOJ. I've heard many things about him, and we'll have to find out what the truth is.
Okay, well, I know what the truth is, right? In terms of the official story. Again, the guy might not exist. Trump might be just an AI creation. I've never seen the guy in person, right? But in terms of the official story, this is the story. The guy has no criminal record either here in El Salvador. There's no evidence that he was ever doing anything criminal other than coming to America illegally. He's certainly an illegal alien and could be deported. He worked construction and other jobs. He was going back to college or to college to get some sort of certificate, and he was arrested at a Home Depot parking lot where he wasn't robbing the Home Depot. He was waiting like these legal aliens and other people do for construction work outside of a Home Depot, right? So this is, this is all we know about. There's no evidence that the guy's done anything criminal and he's a criminal person, right? And so this is important. Like, it's important that the distinction is there, that this guy did nothing criminal. He's not a criminal based in anything other than some guy saying this guy was in a gang, the MI5, whatever gang this is. And, that's not real evidence, because he said he was a gang member in New York and the guy never lived in New York. So that information is suspect. And that a federal judge said that he shouldn't be in prison, that he shouldn't be deported to this prison. He certainly could be deported because he's not an American citizen. And so I have no problem with him being deported. I think a lot of this is just bogus and performative. But these people here illegally, that's something that can happen to you, right? I don't care one way or another. Like I don't have a strong opinion on immigration, but people that came in illegally, the chance of them being deported is always there. Something they live with, right? And so, this guy, I don't know anything about him. Maybe he is a criminal, but they have no evidence to support it. Zero. And so for him to say, I hear all these things, right?
Many things about him, and we'll have to find out what the truth is.
Like they're eating the dogs. Like you heard things about that weren't true, and then you repeated them.
But I will say this, we were inundated by millions of people, many millions of people during the Biden administration. They say 21 million.
Okay, so this is this whole fucking bullshit thing. But this guy's also probably a Christian, the guy who's being deported. I would say 99% chance he's he's just the background he comes from. He's probably a Christian, and he's been sent to a prison. He gave this big Easter message, but they sent a Christian to a prison that the guy didn't commit any crimes. He hasn't been tried and found guilty in either America or El Salvador of any crimes, and he's in an El Salvadorian prison with a lot of gang members. And again, shouldn't be living in America. Sure, he's illegal. I mean, again, not somebody that was the kind of guy that Trump said he was trying to get rid of, some criminal fuck, right? Gang member, terrorist, these people that Trump is supposed to go after them first. And so, like, just this is everything that's wrong with him. He's saying that, to be great, you have to be like, well, I don't know anything about that. I'm not involved. I hear a lot of things about him. No, you have to know. Like, you have to fucking be curious. You have to work at your fucking job. Your job is to know, fuck. Right? Like, this is like about any of these things. Your job is to know what tariffs do. You just don't arbitrarily do things and say to other people, you're supposed to be a knower. You're supposed to know the consequences of your actions and then take responsibility for them and work harder to be a better person. That's what greatness is. People who want to be great, and I'm not one of them, right? People who want to be great at anything in life, you have to be better than he's like the opposite of greatness. Like, he's not a hard worker. Isn't self-reflective. He doesn't push himself. He just makes up shit and lies about it and creates an imaginary world and gets other people to buy into it. And it always collapses because it's imaginary. It's not real. It doesn't come from hard work and due diligence and knowing what he's supposed to know and becoming the kind of person that could be a good leader. Doesn't have the character qualities. It's tough to be great. You have to push yourself. You have to put your life's energy into greatness. And he's never done that for anything in his life, right? He just bullshits his way through life, which is fine. But now you're fucking president of a country that's collapsing around you. And you're like the worst guy. And you're claiming greatness when you've never done anything to be great. So this is somebody who is supposed to be a knower, right? This is the guy that Trump pointed to when they first asked him this question to talk. This guy's a smug, arrogant, bald fuck, right? I don't need the bald thing. I just threw that in. The bald thing's irrelevant. I'm not shitting on bald people. I don't care. We all, all of us are, as we get older, men are, have less hair than we once did, right? For me, it's good because I had thick hair and my head is often hot, but that's neither here nor there. I should have thrown that. Let's get rid of the ball. This arrogant prick, right? Stephen Miller.
How do you know that he is a member of MS-13? The White House has repeatedly said, according to intelligence.
By the way, according to our government and his government. In other words, his government has confirmed based on their own intelligence that he's a member of MS-13. First of all, do you dispute that he's an illegal alien?
Okay, so if he was an MS-13 guy, the guy was working at Home Depot and going to college. And so, I don't think he had a very lavish home. Everyone knows he wasn't in this gang. Like, if he is, he would be a low member or somebody forced in and wanted to get out or whatever it is. And he left his country. Gang members who are doing well in their country will stay there, right? So he came to America for whatever reason, to make a better life. I mean, again, could all be imaginary, but I'm talking about the official story. And so he's provided no evidence that this guy's in this gang, which would also include some criminal activity. Because saying somebody's in a gang itself isn't criminal. Like, he would have to do crimes, right? Like, being in a gang, you could be in a gang, and you can wear gang colors, that's not a crime. It implies that you're doing criminal shit because these are criminal gangs. But he's asked, there's no evidence supporting this guy's in a gang. And so, just the smug, arrogant fuck here, right?
Do you dispute that he's an illegal alien?
No.
Okay. And do you dispute that as an illegal alien, we have the right to deport him?
Going through the
and he went through the legal process. So I would be very...
Again, whether they go... I don't know anything about any of this stuff. Like I said, I'm not all deport everybody because I know that these people are working and doing jobs that are necessary and people are employing them and they're getting away with employing them. Maybe this guy has some illegals working for him, right? Let's check out this guy's nanny or whatever. Maybe he's banging his nanny. I don't know. I don't have any evidence, but let's just say he's banging his nanny. I have two sources that say he's banging his nanny, right? His illegal nanny. And he's impregnated her. He's got 6 kids with his illegal nanny. And they're all anchor babies. I don't have any evidence, but I'm just going to say it because, I feel like it because he's a fucking bald fuck and he's arrogant. So, it's just like stupid shit. Like, you're just making stuff up, right? Yeah, the guy's illegal. You could deport him, but you were deporting him because you thought he was a gang member. He was on your list of, people you got to get rid of first from hearsay from some unreliable source that made up some bullshit about the guy being a New York member of this gang that he clearly wasn't because he didn't live in New York. So you could just come out and say, yeah, we fucked up. And they originally said they fucked up, that this guy wasn't a criminal. But now they've reversed all that. And Trump goes, I don't know. I don't know.
What I'm getting from this conversation, which is educational for me, is that not one person in the media knows the difference between a deportation order and a withholding order. Is that a fair statement? You're learning about this all for the first time right now?
Like, this is him being smug and arrogant. Look, I know this lawyer speak, right? This guy's the epitome of lawyer. He reminds me of that guy that runs the civil liberties or whatever it is, the Anti-Defamation League. That guy went after Kyrie Irving. Ryan's the same kind of guy. Just unfucking likable, smug. I'm smarter than this guy in the fucking room. I know so much more about it. But you're a fucking liar, right? Now I think about it, maybe he raped his nanny, impregnated her. You know? I mean, I don't have any evidence, allegedly, you know, but I mean, just making shit up, right? Like, it's just you're making shit up about people, you know, like in saying, and you're the fucking government. You made a catastrophic mistake here in your inability, and Trump's going to go in there and say he's an Easter person, you know, but like this guy, probably majority of these guys are Christians, these Hispanic people. They're big into Christianity, came to America legally, and was working here, wasn't causing any problems, was never arrested. Nobody complained about him. Just somebody fingered him as a gang member. And, you know, who even knows if that's true? If they just, you know, I mean, who knows why they arrested this guy in the first fucking place? Maybe they just picked up a bunch of guys at Home Depot and said, you guys are all in fucking terrorists and you're all gang members. A couple of you guys are rapists. Let's send you all back to El Salvador. Yeah, but like, I'm a white guy from Kentucky, right? You know? No, you're a rapist from El Salvador. We're sending you to the prison. We got to meet our quota. You know, so I mean, the whole thing's just bullshit, right? Okay, I'm not a fan of drinking games because I don't drink. But if you ever want to play a drinking game and get drunk, then this guy's amount of times he gets to say the word is Donald Trump. Donald Trump? Donald Trump. That's Donald Trump. Donald Trump. Now, he gets to be smug. And he's smug as fuck, just like this other guy. Same guy as the guy we just heard. Arrogant, stupid, you know, coming out. Did a tour with Joe Biden, shitting his pants, Joe Biden in his diapers, after he after he was leaving the White House. Remember, he was walking around with Biden, and Biden's senile and, you know, fucking Parkinson's. And this guy pretending he's the greatest president in the history of America. So this guy's a real piece of shit, the hammer guy. But he gets to be smug because Trump's in the wrong, and Trump is feeding him, you know, all Trump stuff so he can say his name with contempt.
Well, as you've heard, the breaking news of the night is that Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen has managed to visit the Maryland resident Kilmar Abrego Garcia, being held.
He's not a resident. Fuck. He's a legal immigrant. He's a legal immigrant. Not a citizen of America.
In prison in El Salvador in what the Trump administration admits was a mistake. Senator Van Hollen broke the news on Blue Sky, posting, quote, I said my main goal of this trip was to meet with Kilmar. Tonight, I had that chance. I have called his wife, Jennifer, to pass along his message of love. I look forward to providing a full update upon my return.
What's happening here? Like, how's this guy not bald and shaved and in, like, his underwear, like in the... You can just take a guy out to fucking Applebee's. Can you just take a guy out to Applebee's in fucking El Salvador? Like, is this the El Salvador Applebee's, right? Now, who's this cup for? Who else is here? Like, he's got his hand close to him. Here he is. Where's he get the hat from? They allow him to have that hat in prison? Like, is a guy actually in prison? Like, this doesn't help your case. Like, if you can show the guy inside a jail where, like, they're letting him go to fucking Applebee's.
And, of course, the president of El Salvador, in his wise guy mode, mocked the meeting with this tweet saying, Kilmar Abrego Garcia miraculously risen from the death camps and torture, now sipping margaritas with Senator Van Hollen in the tropical paradise of El Salvador. And
wait, was this guy an interpreter? Does he not speak English well enough so that you could talk to him? Did you have to bring a fucking interpreter? who is this guy, right? So, like, this guy here must be, so either he's a liaison for the government or whatever, but there they are sitting outside fucking, you know, in some upscale restaurant here.
Big margaritas with Senator Van Hollen in the tropical paradise of El Salvador. And then at 9:01 p.m. tonight, President Bukele of El Salvador added this to his tweet, saying, now that he's been confirmed healthy, he gets the honor of staying in El Salvador's custody. Well,
boom.
We will see about that. And of course, the president of El Salvador thinks tonight is a time to be mocking this prisoner that he's holding there and mocking this process. But his words are going to be used in court now in this case, as are Donald Trump's, and they are going to be helpful to Mr. Abrego Garcia, because what the president of El Salvador has demonstrated today is just how easy it is to get this person out of El Salvador, just how easy it is to control his movements.
I mean, he gets to go to Applebee's, right?
In El Salvador and out of El Salvador. This will all be part of the case. J. Harvey Wilkinson III has 41 years of experience as a federal judge. He was appointed by Republican President Ronald Reagan.
Okay, so, no, he didn't say, he only said Donald Trump once. So 2 minutes and 10 seconds in, he hasn't said, and we'll go a little bit longer here. But, you know, he's letting us down in terms of the drinking game.
In 1984, in his 41 years of service, Judge Wilkinson maybe had a right to think he had seen it all. It must be difficult to shock the legal sensibilities of Judge Wilkinson at this point in his career, but he used the word shocking today, a word judges rarely use, to describe what the Trump team has done to Kilmar Abrego Garcia after they snatched him out of his
there he is.
Car. With
There's his wife Jennifer and his baby. He doesn't look very gangly. He looks like the kind of guy you see standing outside the parking lot at Home Depot, which I've never seen, by the way. I go to Home Depot all the time. I've never seen anybody standing outside.
Autistic 5-year-old child watching from the back seat, and then
He's
sent him to a deliberately,
this makes him look kind of gangy,
cruel and unusual prison in El Salvador, where he may remain tonight. A 3-judge federal appeals court panel unanimously ruled against the Trump administration in the case today. Judge Wilkinson, writing the opinion, said, while we fully...
Okay, so that's enough. So, you know, I mean, whatever. Like, it's just another fucked up Trump thing. Okay. One more thing. Caitlin Collins presses Trump's border czar on Abrego Garcia. I'm ready to move on, but let's see what this happens.
Decades working on immigration enforcement, serving as a top ICE official under President Obama, and now serving as President Trump's border czar. Tom Homan, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you. We heard from President Trump today, essentially telling reporters, talk to the lawyers when he was asked about Judge Boasberg's ruling that probable cause exists to hold officials in criminal contempt, potentially for violating his orders. Do you think that any of your colleagues have violated orders here?
Nope.
No, I don't.
No.
I think we follow the judge's order. I think we'll let that litigate in court. No, DOJ is fighting that in court, but I don't think we did anything wrong.
And so you're not worried...
Jesus Christ, how many fucking martinis did you have before this interview?
About any of the conversations when it came to Judge Boasberg saying, turn the deportation flights around, and yet they continued to make their way to El Salvador?
Well, you know, I think the information shows those planes were already in the air in international water, as far as I know. So I don't think we did anything wrong. According to his written order, I think we did everything.
Immigration planes, deportation planes, right?
By the numbers.
And so you're not ultimately worried here that anyone will be held in contempt or anything like that as they continue this fact-finding investigation overall on this effort?
No, I'm not concerned about it. I mean, fact find all they want. I think the evidence is clear. I think DOJ's made a strong
He just seems like he came fresh from Applebee's himself.
case, and we'll let it play out in court. I mean, as I sit here today talking to you, I don't think anybody in the administration did anything wrong. I don't think we actually violated a court order.
So we have two judges here. That's Judge Boasberg's ruling that we found yesterday that the president was asked about. The other judge here, the federal judge in Maryland, Judge Zinnes, has been criticizing the government this week for what she says is doing, quote, nothing to return Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the United States. Are you personally aware of any steps that have been taken to facilitate his return to the United States?
The Kilmar doesn't help at all. The Kilmore of the three names in his name, the Kilmore doesn't help his case at all.
States.
Look, I think he's a citizen of El Salvador. He's in El Salvador. He's home. He's an illegal alien with a final order of removal. He's a MS-13 member, which is now classified as a terrorist. So
yeah, but provide some evidence of that.
We removed an illegal alien, MS-13 member, who has a final order removal.
And again, they're classifying the gang as a terrorist. Why is a gang member a terrorist, right? The terrorist is fucking, it's just a shitty word. It's like a conspiracy theorist. It's a word for people who are, being kicked the shit out of by an empire. In this case, the American empire, a global empire, or a country. And they have no other recourse because they don't have an army. They don't have the ability to fight things legally. They have no money and resources. And they're getting the fucking shit kicked out of them, and they're getting abused by a powerful bully, in this case America or whatever it is, and then they do some rebellion, like in the Star Wars movies and in the American Revolution, the rebels were heroes. They're not going to call these guys rebels, but that's what they are, right? And so, and they if they come to American soil to fight something, that they're getting the shit kicked out of them in their country, and that most of that shit's bogus and false flag shit anyway. So, but the reality is, terrorist is a bogus fucking word that they use to demonize, like pirates. People love pirates. Of course, pirates weren't great in some cases, but again, we're rebels. People who are rebelling against authority. And if the authority sucks, which it does, it's keeping order to some extent. Like, it's much worse without the authority, and I've said this before. When you see the government, if the government just disappeared, you'd be like, oh shit, I wish the government would come back. Right, so the government, as bad as it is, it's keeping some order. So I'll give you that part. But this guy, is in a gang, which is completely different than being a terrorist, and they're just calling these guys terrorists, and with no evidence that this guy did anything that would constitute, didn't have any terrorist plans. Right, it was him and his buddies were cooking up some plot at fucking Home Depot's parking lot. Fucking stupid shit, right? And this is the kind of stupid shit that Trumpers buy into. Because they're not curious. They're not truthers. They're not looking for the fucking truth, right? And like this fucking moron Trump, it's like he's not great. This guy's not great. It's a fucking drunken fucking slob. Like he's got a fucking double-digit IQ, right? This fucking moron here looks like Fred fucking Flintstone.
Issued by an immigration judge to his homeland.
So should I read that as to say nothing has been done to bring him back to the United States? That's what it sounds like.
I can't speak to everybody in the administration. I can just tell you what my stance is, and I think.
You mean you guys aren't fucking working this, coherent togetherness?
We did the right thing. I think he's where he should be, and the order of withholding that everybody keeps talking about. Order of withholding is you set aside because he's a designated terrorist, which order of withholding is.
Yeah, but needed. You can call anybody a terrorist. This is the scary part. They can call you a terrorist, me a terrorist. They can call anybody a terrorist then. They can make up shit about you and lock you away and deny you your judicial rights. They're starting with illegals, but they're going to move towards regular people if they haven't already, right? This is the bullshit thing that Cubies wanted Trump to do to fight the fucking bullshit deep state that they fucking believe in and their bullshit Q stuff, where they wanted these so-called patriots, wanted people like Tom Hanks rendered and brought to Guantanamo Bay and given secret military tribunals and the American citizens not to have the right of due process. You would take that shit away, you take it away from everybody. You bring martial law, that affects everybody. It's not just the Democrats, it's every fucking body. You start violating Passe Comitatus, or whatever it is, this idea of the military was never supposed to be used as police. You violate that for Trump, then Biden, the next Democrat can come in, AOC, or whoever the next fucking president's going to be, can come in and do the same thing. That's what morons don't understand. That's what the fucking founding fathers did understand. Not that the founding fathers were great, but they're certainly better than Donald fucking Trump, right? And this fucking drunk Fred Flintstone looking motherfucker.
Unless I believe according to the attorneys. And look, even if he came back, people think he's going to be released and go back to, no, he's going to be detained.
You're going to be
and
detained?
He's going to be removed.
You're going to be detained?
Or the order of removal, either to El Salvador or another country. So this person has an order of removal. He's seen 2 different immigration judges, and he's been ordered deported. And that's exactly what happened.
He was sent to a prison when he wasn't a gang member or a terrorist. That's the problem. The problem isn't the deportation. The problem is the prison. And, it's enough. Like, he's like one of those guys that talks like he's got marbles in his mouth. And just like, maybe he isn't an alcoholic, but he was once. So I was going to lead with this because, I didn't know about demonic seals yet, but here.
K2-18b. No, it's not a character from Star Wars. It's a planet 2.5 times the size of Earth and 700 trillion miles away, and it could be home to living organisms.
Here's what we know.
It's 700 trillion miles away, and you guys fucking found life on it? Way to go, NASA.
Right now, Pamela, the James Webb Space Telescope is so powerful that it actually can analyze the chemical composition of atmospheres from far, far away. And the atmosphere analyzed from K2-18b shows molecules that can only be produced by living organisms.
Holy shit. You have that kind of capability? And, I can't get good internet service?
In other words, it's a step potentially closer to directing life on another planet. For more, we're joined now by
directing life?
Astrophysicist and NASA advisor Paul Sutter. Paul, this is potentially an extremely exciting finding. How compelling is the evidence of life on another planet?
Oh, this is...
Look at her fucking smile.
Definitely very exciting and very interesting. But I have a personal mantra when I encounter results like this, which is if it's interesting, it's probably wrong. And that helps me temper my enthusiasm and my geekiness, excitedness with a healthy dose of scientific skepticism, which we need to approach these kinds of results. Now, the evidence here is certainly the strongest evidence we've ever...
You can't get a real picture of the fucking telescope? We got to watch some animated bullshit?
...had for life on another planet. But in an absolute sense, the evidence isn't all that strong. It's a very weak signal here of these elements. And even if these elements...
Okay, so Jesus Christ. There's life on other fucking planets. There's extraterrestrials that visited this planet, and they fucking know about it. The people control the system. I don't know if these dopes know about it. This guy's some underling and these fucking morons in CNN. But, they built the pyramids, and there's higher developed souls that lived here. People used to live much longer lives, different versions, like a subspecies. We're a subspecies of higher developed life, whatever that is, in terms of, our soul, certainly, and then, the people that genetically modified people on Earth to make a short-term slaves that could work for them with emotional issues and things, but we have unlocked hidden potential. But you're going to make this a fucking story, that little fucking thing that's 7 million miles away, or whatever the fuck it was, that we got some fucking bullshit telescope out there that's finding elements that might mean that this planet could possibly be able to inhabit life. Jesus fuck. Right? This is more annoying than anything else. So it's so fucked up right now that I want to maybe get back to Trump stuff. Otherwise, I'll just cover it tomorrow. It doesn't matter. He's always doing stupid shit. But I didn't know about the Easter thing. Most of this stuff, the story was 3 or 4 days old before I heard about it. And I watch the news a little bit every day, and I get recommended things by YouTube, and people recommend things to me. And I look at, mainstream news, and still I miss out on shit all the time. And I can't believe I missed out on this next piece. So the title of this video is Democrats' Civil War Escalates as Pelosi Announces Re-Election Plan.
20 minutes now past the hour on this holy Thursday morning. Democrats continue coming apart at the seams. DNC's 25-year-old chair, David Hogg.
Holy shit. David fucking Hogg is the chair of the DNC. How did I not know this? Look at this freaking effeminate-looking hood he's got on.
20 minutes now past the hour on this holy Thursday morning. Democrats continue coming apart at the seams.
This weird, he looks like that kid in, there was a kid who incarnated, he was an energetic being that incarnated as a teenage boy on the Star Trek, the original Star Trek. And he's a brat, and he's beating the shit out of the crew, and he's, you know, like he looks like that, this big head motherfucker with a weird hair down, the gay little stuff he's got going on here.
DNC's 25-year-old chair, David Hogg.
I mean, this is how dysfunctional the DNC is. David Hogg, you know, his dad was like ex-FBI, and I'm not going to get into that whole thing, right? Because really, I don't know if you can, but you can go after the DNC chair. And this guy's a fucking tool and a young one. Like, he doesn't, people aren't going to gravitate to David Hogg. He's a created, you know, they gave him a lot of run on the media, and when, you know, then he became popular, became famous, and his dad, you know, was part of the intelligence community. And now he's fucking charge of the DNC. Like, what qualifications does this fucking guy have? He's in charge of the DNC? Like, is this how bad they're going after fucking guns? Like, that's his one thing, right? His one thing is gun grabbing. And, you know, like, that's his big message. And, I mean, I haven't heard of him. I thought the guy disappeared. He's still, you know, he was so mocked by Republicans. And so that's their solution. Like, after getting their ass kicked by Trump. Of course, Trump is burying the Republican Party right now. Like, Trump is digging a fucking monster-ass grave for the Republicans. And it's like, you know, it's like he's like the Titanic, and the Republicans are like people who are going to get sucked down by the fucking, you know, when these big boats go down, they pull you with you. They create an undertow, and they pull you down under with the fucking force of the, you know, the way they move the water. And so, you know, Trump is doing that to the Republican Party, but this is your fucking solution? This is wonderful. Let's hear that one again.
Now past the hour on this holy Thursday morning, Democrats continue coming apart at the seams. DNC's 25-year-old chair, David Hogg, he's age 25, now taking aim at the party's incumbents with a major bankroll of younger challengers. Chad Pergram watching this from D.C. How's this going over, Chad? Good morning there.
Good morning, Bill. Well, Democratic infighting is so bad that they are undercutting one another. That's why there's concern about David Hogg spending millions to launch primary challenges against Democratic incumbents. Younger candidates like 26-year-old TikTok influencer Kat Abugazele
is getting into the race,
challenging 80-year-old Democrat Jan Schakowsky.
Schakowsky. Abugazele going after Schakowsky.
Schakowsky has been in office longer than her challenger has been alive.
Kaboom.
Unfortunately, this party has become one where you have to look to the exceptions for real leadership, as the majority work from an outdated
what nationality is Abugazala?
Playbook. We need a makeover, which means we need a vision that's bigger than what we've been told is possible.
Democrats are
torn
about leaning on veterans who serve the party well and changing the guard. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi intends to run for re-election next year.
Talk about the California Democratic Party 40 years ago, again before.
She can barely fucking talk now. Like, this is Fire Marshal Schill is really shilling it. She's really fire marshaling it.
Many of you were born. I was retiring as the chair of the California Democratic.
I mean, that's one of the great nicknames I've come up with, Fire Marshal Schill. And people started using it for fucking Biden when it was clearly Pelosi. Biden had a host of other nicknames, right?
Party.
You could call
Jojo Magoo was mine.
The odd couple, 35-year-old Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and 83-year-old Bernie Sanders are barnstorming.
I bet Bernie Sanders doesn't smell very good.
The country, they connect with progressive voters.
Our message to Musk and Trump are, we are not going to allow you to destroy the Veterans Administration or...
Okay, so this is amazing. I mean, this is how bad the Democrats, the Democratic media is in their heyday when Trump is just fucking up left and right. He's going to tank the economy, and people are going to be pissed at him and all his Republican people. They're going to start jumping like rats off that ship trying to swim before Trump goes down and sucks them down with him. But this is the response. David Hogg and some TikTokers and fucking AOC and Bernie Sanders. Like, fuck. I mean, if there ever needed to be a third party, which they've made it illegal to be a third party. They got a monopoly, the two parties. It's like impossible to get a third party going. And so this is American this is great. Fucking great. Amazing.
We got Republicans on the defense because we went on the offense.
Holy shit. Look at this dude, this guy kicking fro here. Yeah. This woman, look at her behind her.
You ready
Are you ready?
to go on the offense?
Yeah. He's so fucking annoying. This anti-charisma. So this is back when he was vice chairman, David Hogg. There's not so many videos of him. I wonder why. I mean, but he's just, like, he was always annoying. Like, he was so annoying as a kid, teenager, and even more so now. And just unlikable, like zero fucking likability, charisma. I mean, he's not a youthful person that's going to appeal to youth, right? Like, I don't think people are going to be inspired other than, like, you know, he's like a, you know, what's that girl? I don't know. What's her name?
How dare you?
You just got Greta rolled. And only spirituality will save this world. This is Paul Romano, definitely aboard for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful. So you got Greta roll. Greta. See, when you hear that thing, they go, Greta, Greta. I'll find that if that video still exists, where she's singing that song. She's got a fan base there, some fake contrived fan base, but they're unlikable. Like, they're not a representation of the youth. You know, they're just young, right? They don't get it. Like, David Hogg never got it. He was never, like, cool. He was never, like, you know, a kid that kids would relate to. He's manufactured, right? The title of this video is Greta Thunberg Dance Off Fridays for Future, Never Gonna Give You Up. I mean, look at the amount of kids here, right? So she comes out here. They're plotting. Call some dude up here. Like, listen, like, you know, does that look like a bunch of kids that are pissed off because she can't, how dare you? How dare you? How dare you? You know, that she's upset about climate change, right? She's so upset that she's doing a dance off to this horrible song that used to get rickrolled, right? This was a rickrolled thing. She's definitely got all kinds of. She's definitely on the spectrum. Okay, so this must be the beginning here. Greta, 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 Greta. I mean, just bizarre. And they manufactured this, right? They manufactured her popularity. She's very unlikable. And a lot of it's the faked outrage. I mean, there's some guy who's interviewing her and her parents, and she's all happy, and he's like, aren't you guys taking advantage of this autistic girl? Like, he's, you know, like asking real concerning questions. You know, because parents put her up to all this stuff. It's all fucked up, right? And so that's, you know, that's the David Hogg type person. They manufacture somebody like they're not cool, they're not, you know, popular, they're not, you know, whatever. But they manufacture their celebrity. which it's always the worst when it's not organic because, it's just something that's contrived. And that's what they've done with David Hogg. Okay, so going back to
Hogg.
this.
20 minutes now past the hour on this holy Thursday morning. Democrats continue coming apart at the seams. DNC's 25-year-old chair, David Hogg.
He's vice chair. So everyone else is calling him vice chair. So they, it's still bad, right? But it's not as bad. Like he doesn't have that position that was held by, what was that lady's name? I'll remember later, whatever her name is. Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Remember? She got ousted because she was disgraced and she sucked. Remember that whole thing? And so they can't get a person of quality to chair the Democratic Party. I don't know who the Democratic Party chair is, but David Hogg's the one that's, grabbing all of the oxygen because he's 25 and he sucks. Okay, so as far as I can tell, he's the vice chair, which still sucks. I mean, it's still, unbelievable. I don't know I'll go find out who the chair of the Democratic Party is in a second. But here, he's out there and just his dad's an FBI agent, which is all the intelligence community. I'm at least fair with the intelligence community, saying that they have to lie and do deceptive shit to keep the American system going for our behalf. It really isn't to our betterment because of the spiritual depravity, but, it takes evil shit to keep the system going. And so I'm one of the few people that says that, right, that, if you understand it from different layers of truth, right, there's deception that's needed and evil shit that's needed to keep the system going. But his dad's an FBI agent, which is a huge red flag for anything, that an FBI agent's kid becomes this celebrity going against gun control. If you search his job, like on Google, like what's his job, it came up with gun control advocate, right? But now he's got this other job.
Only 27% of our base is approving of where we are right now as a party. And we lost voting shares with every single demographic except predominantly older voters and highly educated voters. That is a huge problem. And what we're trying to do here is not just focus on primaries.
So they think this guy's the solution to the angry young white guys who are Trump supporters, who are all like people like the Paul brothers and these other guys, Joe Rogan, these other guys who are all gun advocates, right? All own guns. And they think that having this guy as their guy going after young men who are, Democratic leading, and he's going to somehow win them over because he's young. Jesus, they just don't fucking get it, right? They just don't get it.
Where there's potentially an older incumbent, but more than anything, an ineffective person in that position, and we replace them with a generational leader to build the future of our party. We're also focusing on competitive races to support the Democrat in those races.
Competitive general election races.
Yes, but we're not going to challenge the Democratic incumbent in those races. We do not want to lose the House here. Only 27%.
So what he's saying is if they have people like, say, Nancy Pelosi, who have zero chance of losing in very Democratic districts, they're going to challenge the incumbents. The problem is that those older people like Nancy Pelosi have some seniority and more pull in the House of Representatives, and you bring us a new, 22-year-old girl from TikTok, right? But they're trying to get used. But the people that they're bringing in, AOC and these other people, they just suck. And she's no longer really considered young, and so they're trying to bring in young people, but they just suck at it. Like Democrats, young people have always gone with the Democrats. And then they grow into being Republicans, right? When they get money and shit, in college you're a Democrat, and when you become later on you become a Republican. But both parties suck so bad right now. I mean, I don't know how you vote for anybody at this point. A top Democratic official plots to take down party incumbents. David Hogg ignited. I just searched for DNC chair. David Hogg ignited a circular firing squad inside the DNC. James Carville blasts DNC vice chairs. Most insane plan against party. DNC leader announces plans to primary members of his own party. And so it's a little unclear. This is the DNC leadership. So this is the guy, Ken Martin. So this is this guy. But David Hogg is, what more well known than him. This is another vice chair. Renaya Walters Morgan, Malcolm Kenyatta, Artie Blanco, David Hogg, Jason Ray, secretary. So they have 4 vice chairs and this fucking guy, right? Who we are. Who are we? Like, where do we stand? Who do we serve? Let's go back, see if I can find that who do we serve thing. So here is the CNN, the now fired Velshi, whatever his first name was, one of the better CNN people. And they fired him.
Hogan and Kid Rock, UFC CEO Dana White. Democrats may have miscalculated the strength and importance in appealing to men. On their party's website, under the headline, Who We Serve, Democrats showed a diverse list of minority groups, including LGBTQ+, Americans with disabilities, Pacific Islanders, Native Americans, women, many other communities. No mention of men.
There's 16 things here. None of them mention men at all, right? And so so that was from 5 months ago, right after Trump won the election. And he had a guy on there that did some sort of blog about how they're leaving men and young men behind and they're demonizing them. It's having an effect on them, right? And here they still have it. This is the DNC. This is who we serve. This page is still up. The Democrats are the party of inclusion. We know that diversity is not our problem. It's our promise. As Democrats, we respect differences of perspective and belief and pledge to work together to move this country forward. Even when we disagree, we do not merely seek common ground, we strive to reach higher ground. That's never been the case. They're totally prejudicial, and they've tried to censor us in the truth community. And we're not, many of us are not Democrats or anything. So African Americans is first. Now, this is based in alphabetical order. I've seen this list where they put women on top somewhere else. But here they have women and young people in alphabetical order. And so they maybe didn't want to put men above women, because they would have had to put Ben here right after LGBTQ community based in alphabetical order. But they put women in the list and not men. Like, how can you leave men out, right? Like, that's half the population. Now, if you're a man who's a young student or a veteran, which they don't really support veterans, like, come on. Union members, sir, small business community, seniors, rural Americans, Native Americans, LGBTQ, faith community, Latinos, ethnic Americans, Democrats abroad, Asians, Americans, African Americans. So, if you're a man of any of that type, right? So they've left out specifically white heterosexual men who aren't in a union and didn't serve in the military. But they left off men. They should put men in there. And that's why the reasons they lost. And they still have this up there. Like, why would you have this up? Why would you have this up? Like, you think that this is a winning message? Because all these demographics know that you're their party, or at least you want them in their party. But it's glaring. The one thing that's glaring on this list is a lack of men, and they're fucking still doing stupid shit like this, right? This guy Chris Cillizza used to be on CNN or MSNBC. He's one of their, I don't know, one of their more. This is his own thing, so I guess they fired him. But he's more of like maybe hyper liberal or more intellectual. I don't know what he's a little bit different than the rest of them, and he's still annoying.
David Hogg is making news, and it's not the good kind of news. So David Hogg, if you don't know his name, is the 25-year-old vice chair of the Democratic National Committee. He came to prominence in a really unfortunate way. He was one of
unfortunate
the students at Parkland High School in that school shooting where a number of his classmates were killed. He became a very high-profile advocate for gun control.
And really hated by the right.
And he sort of has moved from that space into the broader space, and he was elected earlier this year as vice chair of the Democratic National Committee.
Who votes for that?
Which is a big job. I mean, it's not the chairman, but it's a big job, particularly for someone who's 25 years old. So the New York Times reported on Tuesday night that Hogg, in addition to being the chair of the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee, is also the president of an organization called Leaders We Deserve. Leaders We Deserve stated goal is to go after older Democrats in solidly Democratic districts, Democratic incumbents in solidly Democratic districts, to try to beat them with younger people, and they're going to spend $20 million.
So, you know, the thing is, he's getting hammered. Every news article said that this is bullshit, right? That I looked at. Now, David Hogg is really unlikable, and the Democratic Party is imploding, and this isn't helpful. But look at these old fucks that are in there, right? And you can make a case why they should be in there. But the reality is you have districts where you could run a young person and they're going to win. They have, you know, really no chance of losing because the Republicans wouldn't win when this, they wouldn't be able to win this district. It's so heavily Democratic, some of the districts in these cities around the country, that a Republican has zero chance of winning, especially now when Trump is going to be up against it. And so whoever's in there, this is how Kamala Harris got into the Senate. And so why not bring young people in? I mean, at the very least, you see that there's young people. There's no reason not to do this. And so these people who are in there are just a part of the problem that was Biden and Obama. I mean, these, you know, people that were part of the DNC in the past, and you bring in new people who haven't done shit yet, so they don't have a record to slam them on, and they might appeal to more young people. And you might get a rising star out of this fucking thing, right? At the very least, you get somebody who's, you know, represents a demographic you're going after. And so the fact that these guys are all hammering him, you know, it's the do-nothing Democrats. They don't have their own platform. All they have is, we're not Trump. And they, you know, tanked it with Joe Biden and all the shit that they pulled. And this is like a glory time for them. And they're fucking it up, right? Like, just endorse this thing, because what do you got to fucking lose, right? Nothing, because you're going to get a Democrat in that seat no matter what. But these people who are older, they're going to be more corrupt. They're going to be owned by corporations. They're already going to be jaded. And they're just, you know, most of them are people don't even know their fucking names, right? Nationally, and maybe even locally. So it's not some big horrible thing he's doing, but you know, the Democrats just never can get out of their own way, right?
On that effort, Hogg, to his credit, in an interview with the New York Times, admitted the weirdness of this. This is what he said: "This is going to anger a lot of people," Mr. Hogg said of this efforts. He predicted a, quote, smear campaign against me that would aim to, quote, destroy my reputation and try to force me to stop doing this. Well, I mean, I don't know if it's a
smear campaign. They've already had that, and the internet stood up for this kid, and you couldn't say anything about him, right? Even though he was one of the most annoying new faces. I mean, but now he's fair fucking game, and he's getting it from the Democrats. The Democrats realize he's annoyed and fucking totally unlikable, and you know.
Smear campaign, but I will say
all right, that's whatever it is. These guys are just tools. So David Hogg is their star. Like, how many people knew somebody else on that list I showed you? Like, I didn't. You know, David Hogg was well hated by the right and the truth community, and those are two separate things. I mean, he was just, you know, he was just David Hogg, right? And he's risen to prominence, an FBI child of an FBI agent, all this bullshit. You know, he's got much like a Greta and a gun control Greta. Greta. And so, whether they like it or not, he's one of the few people who pops. And I don't know how much support. Like, again, I know that there's lots of dislike for the guy. And now, you know, he's very annoying. He pissed off all the Democrats now. And so, if you're going to put new young people in, and you're not going to lose a seat. You're just going to take an old person and replace him with a young person. And the majority of people think that the Congress and the Senate is out of touch. And when you ran an old candidate like Joe Biden, but you're going after a youthful vote, I mean, it's just a hard sell. And so you got this guy who's your biggest name. He's trying something bold. You handed the election to Trump, and you're like, fuck that, we can't do that. We can't replace all these old people. Fuck you, Will. Like, get the fuck out of here. You know, like, it's absolutely spectacular in every possible way. It's just a great thing. And, you know, and so I'm going to wrap this part up here. I'm going to make a video about being thoughtless. You know, I have developed the ability just not to think through my meditation. And I'm proud of it. And so I'm going to talk about that all in a video going on the Gratefullness Meditation channel. It's going to be the end of the 189th edition of the Journey series. And so let me put that here, and then that'll wrap up this video. Okay, before I get into my thing from the Journey series, my thing about a thoughtless state, I just came in from outside a little bit out of breath, but I took my cold bath. This thing with David Hogg, and again, very annoying kid and just a nightmare. He's eventually going to piss everybody off, just unlikable. He's got Hillary Clinton type unlikability, Kamala Harris, even for the Democrats. But, what he tried here, there's no real threat to the Democratic Party. It's a threat to old people who have established power and corruption and things. And that's, if you're not going to get rid of that, then you don't have a chance of fucking really, you'll get a good bump in the midterms because Trump's fucked everything up. But after that, you're going to be the fucking do-nothing Democrats who just have one note that we're not Trump. And so, when he did this thing, which, okay, it's a little bit controversial, but a few people come out against it, and they're so not original thinkers, the Democrats. I mean, the Republicans are the same way. Because Trump just says something and goes, oh, yeah, that's the truth, right? It's just, it shows you everything that's wrong with America. Because there's not one person in the media says, yeah, this is probably, we got to try something, right? We were so bad last time. We're not going to lose anything. We'll still retain those seats. So, it just shows you the groupthink and how no one can really think for themselves, or no one wants to be outside the box. It's the opposite of what Trump is doing. And Trump is just trying everything and failing, and then just people patting him on the back. I mean, you see the two juxtaposed extreme situation where there's epic incompetence in both parties for completely different ways of going about their business. All right, so here's that thoughtless thing that I was talking about. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. This is going to be a voiceover at the end of the 189th edition of the Journey series. I just have a tick on my leg I got to throw out. I have very weird extremes with my body. I don't get bruised very often. I saw this, look down, I saw there's this bruise on my arm, and I had no idea how he got it. And I was talking to my wife about it. I was like, do you remember ever me saying I was bruised? And we've been together 6 years now. 2018, that's 7 years, coming up in 7 years. And, I just don't bruise, and I often bang into stuff, and, I'm, like a bull in a china shop a lot, and, do things and just don't get hurt. But I have very sensitive skin. Whenever a tick's crawling on me, I feel it immediately. It sense to light touch, so it's a weird thing. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. And so this is going to go in the Journey series, a standalone video on Gratefullness Meditation channel. That's to do with preparing for death. And also this will be going to the video I made today. I haven't really thought of a title, but it just came to me that it's going to be, what is Donald Trump, David Hogg, and a few other people have in common, and they're all in this video. A planet that demonic seals. So that'll all be in that title. Today is, again, Friday, April 18th. And that'll be at the end of the video. So a few months ago, I realized that I could not think about anything. I could just close my eyes and just not have any thoughts. Now, the goal of the Thumburg meditation isn't samadhi. It's something that it's a stage, or it's a condition that has opened up fairly early on, where most people experience samadhi, which takes years and years under other yogic practices, where you're in a deep meditative state, but you're not asleep, or it's like sleep, but you're not sleeping. And there's Sahaj Samadhi, which is available in the Thumburg system, where you're in samadhi, but you're not asleep. And I've experienced both of those states. There is a point B that's a part of the first point in the heart region, the very first spiritual point on your journey. Your soul goes through these spiritual points in your yatra, your spiritual journey. And there's a point B, a point A and point B. if you meditate on point B, you can reach a thoughtless state, but I don't need to do that. I can just do it by just closing my eyes and not thinking about anything, which, is a tremendous thing. And it shows, I have a very active mind, and I'm always thinking, and I like to think. I like to spend my time thinking. I daydreamed my way through, 12 years of school. Out of boredom, I would just imagine things, sit there, I have big mental jokes, whatever, right? Like a very active mind, and which most people do have. And then, to be able to not think about anything, and for long stretches of time, and thoughts will pop in. You know how you have songs that play and involuntary thoughts, and the cleaning process and the meditative states that are available in Sajmarg makes it so you don't have to deal with those things. So I did that for a little bit, and I'd been thinking about that quite a bit, and I want to get more into that and start doing it in my meditation and working on cultivating that, and also as a preceptor. And the last sitting I gave, it is an individual sitting this past Wednesday, I guess that would be the 16th, Wednesday, April 16th, 2025, individual sitting. And that sitting was one of the better sittings I've given that has passed through me in the Gratefullness meditation channel. And so, then I was working with the thoughtless state and things like that, which I'll talk about more. And then before that, 2 weeks before that, one of my viewers left this comment. It's a section. I'm not going to read the comment, but I'm going to read the section of a book that he pointed out. Okay, so the microphone's on my chest. Just moved it. I don't know if that's going to make some noise, but it's a little bit, my voice is going to be different here. So the person found it in a book called Meditation, which is excerpts from various books. And I found it was from my master. So on the meditation book, there's two books. One called, it's the Sajmarg Learning Series or something. There's a book called Meditation and one called Cleaning. And it had the books that it came out of. So it did it in the order of books. It took little excerpts out of various books. And it took it out of the book called My Master, which Charji wrote about his master, Babaji. I'm hoping I just moved my mic again, so there's a little bit of interference there. And so it starts here. I'm going to read the whole thing from my master. I asked Master, he asked Babaji. Master became pensive. He said here, the mantras are said to have worked even if spoken to the ears of an unconscious person who is dying. The only stipulation is that the person be not dead. I asked Master about this. Master became pensive. He said, because you are asking me sincerely, I would tell you, there is no use in this for spiritual progress. Yes, it may grant the person a better rebirth, but what is the use of that? So he's talking about whispering a mantra into somebody's ears as they're dying. Our idea is not to be reborn, however good the next life may be. Our aim is liberation. Now I'm telling you, the aim of the Sajmarg system, there's two goals. Liberation, which is no longer having to have any future lives, getting out of your earthborn bondage. And the other one is God realization. So having a better life in your next life is good, but the goal of the system in Sajmarg is at least liberation. Our aim is liberation. Now I'm telling you the correct thing. At death, the mind should be made a complete blank. No thoughts must be allowed to come into it, not even of gods or anything like that. It must be made completely blank so that at death it can merge with the source where the condition is that of nothingness. And I tell you, for Abhyasis of our Santha, this is very easy because this is what our meditations, this is what we are taught to do every time they sit in meditation. To us, this becomes second nature. When we sit in meditation, the mind becomes thoughtless. So what we experience, to put it in one way, is a condition somewhat like that of death. You may call it a condition of death in life if you like. So when the time comes, we automatically get into this state of mind, and there's no impediment even at the last moment. Now you see how much harm this Karna mantra can do. It is actually a method of dragging the soul back to the existence instead of allowing it to go on its way. If I tell you this to the pundits, they will pounce on me, but this is the correct thing that I am telling you. So the full quote is from My Master by Parthasarthi Rajagopalachariji, Master Chariji, the third master, about Babaji. And there's a variety of those books. It's been reprinted, but the original book, there's Babaji's on the cover. It's on page 138 and page 139. And on the meditation page book, it's half the quote is on page 69. And so let me just speak to some of this stuff. When you're saying these things about the pundits, they have, I was talking about this in the video that I was just making, that, one pundit says one thing and then everyone else sort of agrees with that person. Sometimes there's something controversial, but people often, there's just groupthink in the political parties and in, the Hollywood, all these different things that are covered, sports, talk shows and things. And everybody sort of, that someone makes a statement, people say, oh, that sounds right. And everyone jumps on with it. What Babaji was saying was that traditionally in India, they whisper these mantras in somebody's ear as they're dying. And the mantra is something spiritual. So it's better to think about something higher than something lower. And so it might have some effect in the person having a noble thought, having a spiritual thought before they die. But that thought will bring them back into the next life. Whereas if they're thinking about nothing, liberation is that much easier because they're merging into nothingness, which is, God is very subtle. And so there's this thoughtless state. And Babaji, was a groundbreaker, what people call now as a disruptor in terms of the knowledge base that he had, the things that he would say. And so, first of all, there's that. So I have been, for the past 3 or 4 days, maybe a week, I think it's 3 or 4 days, I have, in my meditations and sittings, starting Tuesday night and then Wednesday, I have been getting into a thoughtless state. I was having trouble sleeping, and that was part of it. And I would say the mission prayer and just go into a thoughtless state, which I found very, amazing, the ability to do that. Not that I have the ability, but it's just been honed by the Sajmark system. I couldn't do it without the system. Like I say, I have a very active mind. And just sit there, a thought will pop into my mind at different times, but for the most part, it's just thoughtless. And the more I do it, the more better I'm getting at it. And then I fell asleep in a thoughtless state, and I had really amazing sleep. And, I guess there were some dreams and just some experiences of the sleep. And my thought process the next morning was very clear. But what I also experienced, and also given that sitting where I'd have a thought or a suggestion, to start transmitting, the idea would be to start transmitting. And then there was a suggestion, it was an absolute sitting, which you connect the person experiencing this sitting, the idea that their mind comes from the absolute, the original thought that created the universe. And you don't have that second part, but that's what the absolute means. Their mind came from the absolute, is identical to the absolute, and is connected to the absolute, and is meditating on the absolute. You have this thought, and then it becomes a feeling, and then there's no thoughts. There doesn't have to be any thoughts. There's just energy. You can feel the energy surging through your body, surging out. There's a conduit, in a very subtle way. And then, I found that I was breathing heavily, like I was putting some effort into being thoughtless. And then I relaxed my breathing, and that changed it. That sent, deeper level vibrations. And I was just sitting there experiencing the feeling of the sittings and my meditation. And I realized, I wasn't thinking about this quote because I wasn't thinking about anything. But when you're in a thoughtless state, you're dead. Like it's just, you're a big part of you being alive is the ability to think, right? You can be in a coma, you can be brain dead, and there could be brain activity. But if you're able to seesaw brain activity, you enter in a state of death, right? Because our ability to think, I think, therefore I am. And so it's interesting because you are going into a death-like condition. When you fall asleep, there's still brain activity and your mind's reprocessing things, you're dreaming. But when you're having no thoughts at all, and I would wonder what it would be like if, I'm not going to do this because I'm not going to have somebody hook up electrodes to my head because I don't give a shit. But it'd be interesting to find out what it would be if they were able to study this. And, I mean, the whole thing's really interesting because it's like you're dying and you have this, sense of like, I mean, that's why people like to think, right? It's like there's people who have to talk constantly. There's people who can't let there be any silence. They can't just get into a stand. There's people who can't even watch TV without talking, like people who talk all the time. They can't, the airway has to be either with them talking or them listening to somebody, more often them talking. And they can't stop and just, like sometimes you're with somebody and you both stop talking and you're just sitting there together, maybe in a car or, wherever it is. Like you don't always have to be interacting in a verbal way. And then there's people who, they can't settle down and meditate because their minds are too active and busy and they have all random thoughts and they have no control over their thoughts and they're just all these types of things. And some of the fear is of like that feeling of death, or if they stop, people who are experiencing trauma or repressing memories, they can't stop doing any of those things because they don't want to stop, because that's when like the monsters set in their mind, right? That's when the abusers and the negativity comes to them. So, this is all really important stuff. I was like, I got to find that audio, and I think I mentioned putting it in a Journey series, maybe the list one, I don't know, where I had this, I was talking about sleep, and I did all this research because scientists don't know what happens when you cross over from being conscious to unconscious. Sometimes you're in and out of sleep, you're phasing in and out, your eyes are open, your eyes are closed, and then there's a moment where you just go, right, where you're out, and then you're unaware of what's going on around you, right? You're watching TV, you're laying in bed, and you're whatever you're doing, and then there's some point you're unconscious. And you might wake up in 5 minutes or a half hour, but you went out for that time, and they don't know what happens to you physiologically or any of these things. They have no idea. And I was going to make a video about this like 5 years ago, and I made the video and then lost the video. But I have one of the voiceovers, and I'll look to see if I can find that, and I'll include that in future videos, talking about this stuff. So I just looked up the audio. I must have it hopefully on some backup. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But I had it at some point. So, but some of what I was saying was, I found a folder of sleep where I made the video. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. So going into this idea that you're thoughtless, it's the ability to think that gives you like life, right? It's who you are. If you're not thinking, if you're in a vegetative state. And so I found that there's been this profound benefit to not thinking. Not through the whole meditation, but I've been doing it at the 9 p.m. prayer. And I've been doing it, whenever I meditate and going to sleep. And, sometimes it's a little bit harder than others, but it's been, very effective. And then to read this thing about, it's practicing for the moment of death, which is really important. I have a whole playlist about meditations, and I'm going to give some sittings and preparing for death, because that's a big part of what Sajmark does. And I have some sittings up on that already. Some of these, I have some videos up there and sittings and things. And this is going to be a part of that playlist on the Gratefullness Meditation channel. And so, but I've been very impressed that I've been able to do that, not by myself, obviously. It's not something I would think I would be able to do. And I think it's really going to help me as a preceptor and doing spiritual work and all the things I do. Because, after you do it for a little bit, there's a reduction in thoughts. Even if you're having some thoughts, your tendency will be to go back to a thoughtless state, or, have your thoughts will be more subtle and less, having less an effect and all these things. Anyways, let me wrap this one up here. I'm going to continuously talk about this because I'm just starting to experiment with it. And, I don't know how long I'll be doing this or whether it'll be a permanent, part of my meditation. Again, thoughtlessness isn't a part of the goal, but it's actually a tool and something that can make meditation, where you're feeling things and you're like almost, it's times where if I'm doing preceptor work or I'm, meditating, it's like I'm experiencing life without a mind, like life without a physical brain, where you're, feeling your way, and there's, it's a different level of experience when you're when you're a bodiless soul, where your soul is no longer in a body, and you don't have eyes and sensory organs, and you're in what would be darkness because you don't have the ability to feel, or you don't have the ability to see, and that you can feel things on a spiritual level, on an energetic level, and a thoughtless state opens that up. So anyways, again, I'm going to put this up on the Journey series, and then also those two other places. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paramount, definitely pointing from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.